Hey, I'm just quickly jumping in here before we get into today's conversation. If you're enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Click that little bell button to get notified when the new episodes come out. And if you'd like to support Paramount Importance even further, please check out our website, paramountimportance.com. We've got some awesome merch there. They've got these cool shirts, these cool hats, all environmentally friendly and the highest quality we could go. It generally helps us keep on doing what we are doing, spreading the word of science, inspiring a whole bunch more people. It really helps us out. But without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Let's go. Paramount Importance. Well, as I've been doing a lot of research into this topic and seeing what is happening down in the algal labs down there is so many applications and projects that you're working on. So I think we're going to struggle to try to fit even half of them in this podcast.
Let's just try as much as we can.
Yes.
I think that's the most important thing. That's right.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do.
Some of it's so extremely fascinating. So I've got a few questions here. I was speaking to a few people over the last few days, and they were like, "Oh, ask this, talk about this, talk about this." I'm like, "Oh, that's like a whole different area. I didn't even know that was happening." So
yeah, but there are look, first of all, we can continue this discussion later on if you're interested. But there are main projects that we do, and there are lots of very, very exciting side projects. And I see which ones we can cover today during the time that we have.
Yeah. Well, let's start from the very start so we can all get an understanding.
Sure.
What is algae, and can you explain the diversity of algae from microalgae to seaweeds and what makes them so versatile?
Sure. So algae are the most basic photosynthetic organisms. So they can convert the oxygen, carbon dioxide and water to produce oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. They are also the baseline of the food chain. So when it comes to evolution, they're one of the earliest organisms which have been evolving. And the diversity is massive. So we go from very simple cyanobacteria to fairly complicated kelp, and they are all accounted to be algae. When it comes to diversity, we have mostly two types. We have microalgae, which the name's with it. They are microorganisms, so you need to have a microscope to look at them. And we have macroalgae, which the seaweed sits under those. These are bigger. We can see them with the naked eyes. But when it comes to the diversity in general, they're very diverse. We need to bear in mind that all of the land plants, they have evolved from one group of algae, the chlorophyta. And we've got several different groups and families of algae that when it comes to taxonomy. So when it comes to genetics, they're extremely diverse.
Right. So the land plants, they've all come from the
green algae,
the green
chlorophyta,
Right.
One group of chlorophyta. So even chlorophyta divides to several groups, and one of them decided to evolve and come to the land and become the land plants. And they became much more complex. So the complexity that we have in the land plants, we do not have it in the algae. So the algae are much more simpler than the land plants.
Right. Yeah, I did a podcast with Trina the other day about Phytophthora, and that's a brown algae.
Yeah. So Phytophthora, interestingly, they're actually dinoflagellate, which are brown algae. They have evolved from one group of dinoflagellate, and they decided to lose their chlorophyll, and they decided to become parasite. And so all of that Phytophthora comes from one single group of algae.
Right. So you mentioned that they're the base of the food web. So try and make this important for everyone to understand how important that is. I think most people would understand it's a lot of things come from that. Why are algae so important for us and our ecosystems?
Oxygen. Without them, we wouldn't be able to breathe. I mean, the reason that we are on this planet is because of the photosynthetic organisms, plants included. But most people wouldn't probably know that 50% of the oxygen that we are breathing comes actually from the ocean. And that comes from algae. A massive part of that comes from algae. Out of that 50% of that comes from one group of algae called diatoms. They're one of the most dominated algae in the world, and they're abundant. So they're very good in doing the photosynthesis in the sea, releasing the oxygen that would allow us, not only us, every other organism to live on this planet. That's one side. They also produce sugar, which is we need that sugar to be able to survive. The sugar is like a fuel to the engine of the vehicles. Interestingly, a lot of the fossil fuel that we're using today, they're actually the outcome of the algal growth millions of years ago, when there was abundance of carbon dioxide. So we had massive bloom of algae that they were died, and they went all down the ocean, and over the years, they through several mechanisms and processes, they became fossil fuel that we are using right now.
Right. So the microalgae from millions of years ago is now what we're using in our cars, and
that's exactly correct. A lot of the fossil fuel we're using right now, they're the outcome of those microalgae.
Wow.
Growth many millions of years ago.
Yeah. So what about with climate change? Because is that in a way helping the algae with making more warmer environments and
hard question to answer. We don't know, because we know that we have a trend of climate change. We know that trend seems to be increasing the temperature, and we know that the atmospheric carbon dioxide is increasing. When the atmospheric carbon dioxide is increasing, one of the places for that carbon to be deposited is in the sea and in the water. There is, and when it's dissolved in the water, obviously it would potentially be helping the algae to grow more. Now, if that is going to help the algae to be more successfully grow, what would be the effect of that on the overall diversity of algae in the ocean? There has been some modeling being done, but this is not exactly what I do. But I know that there are lots of people who's very closely looking at these trends.
Okay. Interesting.
Actually, what we can do, we can go back in the time by looking at the fossil trends of these over the past, when the carbon dioxide level was higher. But modeling this is very complex.
So it's hard. We're not sure if the algae, because in South Australia there was that big algae bloom.
Yeah. So that's a little bit more complicated, because when the algae wants to grow, they need to have nitrogen, phosphorus, like fertilizers. So us human beings, we are very good in not treating those nutrients. So a lot of time they find their way to the waterways. And when they are in the waterways, that's the time that you suddenly see a massive bloom of algae, because especially the weather gets warmer, they see the opportunity. There is sunlight. There is nutrients. They just bloom. And unfortunately, at the sea, a lot of time those becomes harmful algal bloom. Not necessarily all of them are toxic, but they become harmful because of the mass of those. Actually, at night they can take up a lot of oxygen, so they make the water reduce the oxygen content in the water.
Yes, yeah. I'm an estuarine ecologist.
So you've
main thing we've seen it a fair bit in the estuaries.
Yeah, but my work is actually looking at the benefits of the algae rather than. So this is the challenge that we have with the algae. But I think a lot of those challenges that we see in the rivers, actually man-made because of the issue that we created. For instance, around the Swan, you've got plenty of the lawns and people fertilizing the lawns. And if the nutrients not being absorbed by the roots of the plants, they normally end up being in the waterways. And that's where you get the blooms of algae in Swan. This is what we don't like to see.
No.
So what we're doing, we're trying to resolve this issue.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let's jump into that. So a lot of your work is with the cultivating of algae and all that as well. What has been the process of cultivating, or would you call it farming of algae?
Oh, yeah. Cultivation, farming. Actually, it's a very good point. I like to rank algae farming as agriculture. So there is a lot of debates that should sit when it comes especially to microalgae. Should it sit on the aquaculture because they grow in the water, or should we call it agriculture? I like to call it agriculture because I'm looking at the products from the algae. Hence, the there are two main systems for mass production of algae. There are open ponds, which the name's with it. It's an open to air system, and there are closed photobioreactors. In Western Australia, we are very lucky because of the climatic condition that we have. This is very suited for open systems because we have a massive amount of sunlight, and the weather is consistent. Almost 12 months of the year, we're getting a good weather for growth of the algae. So we can use open systems. However, if you don't have the land available, and if you are in the climate which is colder than what we have in WA, the other systems are closed photobioreactors. They're much more expensive to operate. You get generally higher productivity, but the cost of building them most of the time inhibits mass production of algae for commodity products. If you're after high value products, that's a different ballgame.
Right. So we're in the cultivating for the bioreactors, and also, is that what people call them? It's like pond scum on the top, or like just the ponds are just
I don't call them scum.
No.
yeah, but that's right. Normally you get them even in the swimming pool. If you don't treat the water, you get the algae grow in the swimming pool.
Are they relatively easy to maintain?
Very easy. Look,
right.
if you know how to deal with them, very easy. We have been operating cultures for several years with minimum maintenance. But it's the same as, again, going back to the lawn in front of your home. Very similar to that. If you know how to maintain it, if you know how to treat it, keeping them alive and keeping them happy, you should be able to harvest them 24/7, 365 days a year.
Right.
Minimum maintenance, yes.
Okay. Well, let's talk into the applications of them, because there's so many different places. So let's start with the wastewater treatment,
right?
Because that is quite interesting.
Sure. So around 2012, we decided that we should look into the application of wastewater treatment using algae. First of all, I don't call it wastewater treatment. I call it waste to profit. Because the wastewater treatment is when you have the wastewater and then you find a way of getting the nutrients out of that waterways. What we're doing, we are using the algae to grow on the effluent to absorb the nutrients to generate the biomass. And we have the value of the biomass in there. So the biomass that we're generating is valuable and can be sold. So that's why I specifically designed this, that we can use it for farmers, for instance. Look, remember that the very interesting thing is up to 78% of the waste on this planet never gets treated.
Really?
Yes.
What kind of waste is this? This
is organic waste. This is the farming waste. This is the waste that is not easy to collect. There is a lot of waste goes to the landfill.
Yeah. And, what's farming waste?
Like pig poo, cow poo, or all of those. Anything organic. Yeah. Anything that can be digested. So around 12 years ago, we looked into see how can we develop a process that can treat those waste that would generate profit for the farmers, to help the farmers rather than putting extra pressure on them. So we looked at and obviously algae comes into your mind because of their ability of taking up the nutrients. But when you're looking at the organics don't have only nitrogen and phosphorus. They have nitrogen, phosphorus, and sugar. So I looked at the process and I said, look, can we treat the waste using algae? And you go back to the literature and you see around 1950s, at Berkeley, there is a process developed which was treating the whole of the human waste using algae. But the problem with those systems is that when you try to use algae, you don't only get algae. In the process, you get algae, larvae, bacteria, you get protozoa, everything in that, because of the composition of the wastewater. So I said, look, instead of we do this, what if we just split the process to two stages? First stage, we go anaerobic digestion. Anaerobic digestion is a fairly basic process off the shelf that you can convert almost all the organics to produce methane. Now, the farmers love this because the methane that is generated can then be burned to produce electricity. Now, you need to bear in mind, by converting the organic waste to methane through the anaerobic digestion and burn it, you're already reducing your carbon footprint. Because if that waste doesn't get treated to be converted to methane in the digestion process, and if you put it in the landfill, for instance, it gets digested and the methane goes to the atmosphere, which is methane is a horrible greenhouse gas. So by doing this, you're already doing a huge favor both for the farmers because you're reducing the carbon footprint, you're producing energy on farm. So that would also make them be less reliable to the grid electricity. The outcome of these, which is that carbon dioxide, the other side is that because the anaerobic digestion is not a full process, it cannot remove the nitrogen and phosphorus very well. So in the effluents coming from the digestion, you still have the ammonium and the phosphate. This is where we put the algae at the end. So algae use the ammonium and phosphate very well, and they grow. And now, because we grow the algae in this sort of selected condition, the biomass that we get at the end is also very high in protein. We get some of our species going up to almost 60% protein content.
Whoa.
Now, that's exactly
in algae.
In algae, yes. So now this protein is a plant-based protein. In my view, we're not also growing that on the waste. We are growing it on the effluent, which is coming out of the anaerobic digestion. So the waste has already been treated through the anaerobic digestion. So now the cleanliness of the biomass is much higher than almost a algal system. We still have a background bacteria, but a lot of those bacteria that comes with it's like a probiotics to us. That these are probiotics to algae. So none of them almost are toxic or causing any issue. So there is a huge opportunity to use that biomass directly to for many purposes. We are at the stage of testing the products right now.
Wow,
that's right.
Yeah, you've mentioned so the anaerobic digestion, is that because I can only think of digestion as in my stomach.
So now the digestion that happens in your stomach is completely different.
Yeah.
The digestion in your stomach, you've got, we are monogastric. Yeah, so we have only one stomach. So in the stomach, you're breaking down things, then this goes to the small intestine. In the ruminants, they've got a different digestive system. So actually, anaerobic digestion is exactly the same process that happens in the cow's stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So you also hear that the cow's generating a fair bit of methane. Yeah, so this is exactly the same process. But we put that process in a reactor.
Right. Okay.
And use that process to produce methane.
Right.
And digest the organic waste.
Right. So how do the farmers collect the organic waste, and do they just have to go around the paddock, shovel poo into a barrel?
That's a very good question. So now, if you're dealing with a piggery, they're fairly concentrated, so it's easy to collect that waste.
Or a dairy, I guess.
Exactly. The dairy is another one. So we are currently working with the dairy down south in Margaret River. We're putting a proposal with them to build actually algae farm at their dairy to be able to treat their digestate because they're already putting anaerobic digestion in their dairy. And if you're, for example, working with abattoir, it's also easy to collect the organic waste at the end of the abattoir. If you're dealing with the chicken production, a lot of chicken production or intensive chicken production, it's easy to collect the waste. But if it's a free farm, it's very hard to collect the waste. This is where one need to think about how to collect these organic waste.
I imagine you would need, does it need a lot for it to create? Because I can say the scale of energy. So how much waste do you need to say run a household?
Oh, look! How long is a piece of a string? More waste you generate, more electricity you get at the end. I don't have the number on top of my head.
No. I was just wondering, so how feasible is
So let's put it this way: the farm that I'm talking about down south, putting an anaerobic digestion, keep them away from the grid electricity. So it's a new farm, and it's but it's also a fairly large dairy. So the amount of cows they have is, and the waste that they're producing is big enough that the anaerobic digestion that they're installing is enough for them to generate enough electricity for the whole farm.
Yeah. Well, so this is a very good renewable energy system that's going to be.
Absolutely. When it comes to carbon and carbon credit, this project ticks all the boxes because you're removing all the carbon and it's almost zero waste. So in the process, you don't get any waste.
Yeah. And then there's also said there's the byproduct of like a probiotic or.
Oh, no. Look, the end product is protein that you get from the algae. Depends on the algae that we grow on the digestate. You may also get other products. We are looking at growing spirulina on the digestate. Spirulina is a cyanobacteria that you go to the shops and you pay $30-40 a kilogram to buy the product for as a supplement. Now, we are not at the point of introducing this into the human market, but I think this is just around the corner. I think it's just making sure we work with the health department, making sure we work with the government and working through the policies and legislations because these don't exist yet. We need to work through this. And this is not only us, our colleagues also in Europe working on these things. Because, look, a while ago, a very wise person told me that somebody's waste is somebody else's profit. In my view, we shouldn't be throwing any of the nitrogen and phosphate that we generating as a waste. We should be recycling it.
Yeah.
And this is what the aim of what we're trying to do.
Can it be applied to other organic material? So say our Fugo bins or things like, is it?
It can, as long as we looked into the Fogo.
Just for the global listeners, that's like food scraps.
Absolutely. Why not? Look, generally, if you get the organic waste such as the cow poo, they rich in nutrients. That's what makes them very suitable for anaerobic digestion. You probably don't get the same amount of the ammonium from Fogo. And there is a little bit of other challenge with the Fogo, and that's a contamination. If people are not careful when they're putting their waste in the Fogo and they put plastics in there, they put other non-organic, they would all cause potential issue with the process.
Right. So that's why you can't use sewage water.
We can. We have actually tested this for domestic waste. The process works. Look, obviously, because for algae, we need to have ponds and pond system. That means that I don't think we can do this, at least at the stage that we are, for treating Perth waste. It's just too much of the effluent. But for small cities, small villages, actually one of my aim in one of the things that I'm really interested to do is if we can apply this process in developing countries for small villages when there is not a dedicated wastewater treatment. Or even in regions in WA or in Australia, when you have a small city that it's too expensive to use water corporation wastewater treatment system. If you can apply this to generate electricity on site for the village or for a small town, and but the issue I have is where to use the biomass for, because if it's grown on the human waste, it's not easy to put it back into the market. We can potentially use it as a fertilizer, but it's one thing to be discussed.
Can algae help clean up the waterways as well?
Absolutely. This is the way that we're cleaning up the waterways, by stopping the waste to get into the waterways. We are stopping it at the beginning. So if we don't treat it, what's gonna happen? It's gonna go on it's gonna be, for instance, if it's gone on the farmland, it rains, where the water goes, it goes
into the catchment, into
it
the
goes to the
estuary.
catchment, it's
Or
the
river,
estuary.
or-
So
Yeah.
by doing this, we are actually cleaning up the waterways. This is one of the motivations I have.
Starting it from the source.
Yes, exactly. Instead of, so prevention is always better than treatment. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to prevent getting the nutrients into the waterways.
Wow.
Yeah. But this would require the farmers to be on board with this. This would require government assistance. And yeah, we need to get everybody in line with this.
How far away do you think we are from having this happen?
It is happening as we
But
speak.
like before it's applied quite more like it becomes sort of common practice.
So we at Murdoch, we established a spin-off company called Algae Harvest. Again, one of my motivation to ask Murdoch University to establish this spin-off company is that I couldn't find anybody to adopt the process. So at the end, I said, look, maybe we should be doing this. So by having this company, I think we're gonna go and do this as a demonstration to demonstrate it to the people that this works. And when this works, others gonna come after it. It's, in my view, it's going to be something that we can easily establish in many of the agriculture practices in Australia, in WA especially. This is the beauty of WA, because that's what makes it extremely exciting for this sort of applications.
Yeah. What species of algae are you using?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we have isolated our algae locally, and it took us almost the last 12 years to isolate those. And we tested them on the piggery waste, abattoir waste, dairy waste, chicken waste, name it, digestates. I mean, it's a chlorella species and also a Senedismus. It depends on the digestate. It's either one of these two. But these species are adapted to be able to grow in this sort of waste.
Okay. Right. And are they applicable, like are they commonly found, well, you said they're local species. So if someone was to, adapt with the cultivated digestive method of cleaning up wastewater, can they be used, in different parts of Australia and globally, or do they have to find the local
I think so. I think the species that we isolated can be used pretty much throughout WA. But if we, for instance, if we go to the locations that these species don't grow, we can re-isolate and find another species if need be. So we have developed a process at Murdoch University Algae Innovation Hub for screening these species. So we have the process in place.
Okay. How fast can the algae grow?
That's again depends on the season. If you're in summer, the resident time is somewhere between maybe 2 to 3 days. If you're in winter, that goes to a week or 9 days.
Right.
Yeah, because you get less light. It's also cooler when it comes. But the beauty of the process is that, as I said, we have tested this at site at an abattoir for 13 months and the culture never crashed. We also regularly testing this at through PhD studies that we do at Murdoch for long term, because that's one of the most important things. You cannot have a wastewater treatment process that only works for 2 months or 3 months of the year.
Yes.
You want to have it 24/7, 365 days a year. And we have demonstrated this.
So in times of like winter, when the algae slows down, can that get, when I don't imagine the abattoirs slow down or the piggeries, it's like the same constant waste. Can there be the stage where there's too much nutrients getting? Yeah.
So you size it. Size it, and you probably have a reserve tank somewhere that some of these goes to this. Remember, we are not treating the waste directly. We're treating the digestate. And we can keep the digestate somewhere for a certain number of time before the process gets more active. I actually have designed this for the process to be running through the year. It can be done.
Okay. With the other bits of waste that isn't treated, what happens to that? Where does that go? Is it just
we can treat all of the waste?
Oh, all of it.
All of it. Yes. So what I meant is that consider that your piggery runs 24/7, 365 days a year, and you're generating the same amount. You don't have to treat all of the digestate that you're generating during the winter time. You can keep them, and then as long as you've got a tank to be able to keep them, you can keep some of them. And when the algae grows faster during the spring and autumn and summer, you can treat those.
Okay. And those other products that you're producing, how does it turn in from like an algae into something you're going to be digesting or?
Yeah. So algae grows on anaerobic digestate and treat it. So remove the ammonium, phosphate, and all the other nutrients in the water. So that at the end, we get the biomass. The biomass is, as I mentioned, it's somewhere between 45 to 60% protein. The leftover is carbohydrate and lipid, fats. The lipid is very exciting because lipid, when we tested it, is very similar to the fish oil.
Right.
So now, potentially, and again, this is one of my long-term dream, is that when we get this biomass, we crack the algae, we open it up, we extract the protein, and so now at this point, it's already been also extracted, so there is nothing else is in it. So hopefully that would also be suitable for human market, because I'm really, really interested in getting this into the human market. So we have a clean protein, you have the clean fish oil, so you can sell, so farmers can sell these two products. The leftover is a carbohydrate. My dream is that we convert the carbohydrate to bioplastics. So on site, we do have a small operation to ferment the carbohydrate to bioplastics. This can be done. Again, I have a PhD student right now looking into this to digest the carbohydrate from these algae to bioplastics. So now, at the end, you're getting potentially 3 products. You're going to get a clean protein that can be sold. You get a fish oil. Just imagine how much you're paying for a fish oil tablets. And you have the bioplastics. And there is market for all 3 of these. Now, this is not something that we have developed fully today, but we looked at the biomass and we said, because as you said, one of the questions that you're always hearing is that when can you do this? Can you do this now? So we can do the process now, and we can right now use the biomass as a fertilizer. So now the advantage of this is the biomass, because it's not only contains N and P, nitrogen and phosphorus, it also contains carbon. Almost 50% of the biomass is carbon. So now, when you're adding this product as a fertilizer to the soil, it significantly helps our soil. We have demonstrated this through a work that we did with the University of Western Australia. And we noticed that the microbiome of soil is significantly improved when you're using our biomass when compared to the conventional fertilizer. So this is the entry to the market when it comes to the biomass. But the long-term view is that this is hopefully going to be protein, bioplastics, and fish oil products.
That's incredible.
Sense?
Yeah. Sure. And I can imagine that the amount of like carbon storage as well is like incredibly high straight away when you're just putting, if it's got 50% carbon.
Absolutely. It's significantly helping the carbon, soil carbon. Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. But look, as I said, this is the entry point. The fertilizer side is the entry point. But look, another species that I mentioned, the spirulina, if we are successful, which I think we can do it, if we are successful, spirulina is a very interesting cyanobacteria. It up to 10 to 18% of the biomass is a pigment. This pigment is a blue pigment. It's called phycocyanin. It's a naturally water-soluble blue pigment that we can produce to replace the synthetic food coloring. Right now in US, especially the FDA started stopping using the synthetic food colorant. I am not aware of a lot of organic, naturally produced blue food coloring. So now there is an opportunity again for the farmers to produce this locally, use it locally, or potentially export it to to other countries. So we can be the hub of producing worldwide blue pigment for the world.
This sounds incredibly interesting and important work. What is the biggest restriction? Is it the technology, or is it an expensive process?
Neither. The biggest problem is time. To be honest, yes. I think sometimes we are a little bit ahead of ourselves, so that's why it takes time to convince people. It takes time to take these processes and apply them. We have demonstrated this process at Murdoch University. We have also demonstrated this on site at a small scale with some of our partners. But the next stage, we need to do this at the larger scale on farm. This is why I'm very hopeful that we get this grant, that we can build these ponds down south in Margaret River, so we can run this on site at the farm, which would help the farmers, and also would show us that how far we can go with this. That would be fantastic. So now, if we demonstrate that, post that, it's just copy and paste everywhere else.
Yeah, it sounds extremely important.
Yeah.
In the process of, like, as you said, separating the different proteins or fats to and carbohydrates, is that like how, when you said you're splitting them, am I thinking like of a molecular level or older, bigger, and then is that process expensive?
That is a hard answer. That's a very hard question to answer. So it's not as simple as soy, for instance. So when you get soy or sunflower oil, you just press them and just get the oil out. We need to develop the processes. There are some processes that has been developed, but this is not what I can develop. This is something that I need to collaborate with somebody else at potentially another university, somewhere in Australia or somewhere overseas to develop this. That's what I said. This is my view, is to get there, but this would potentially take another 4 or 5 years to get to that point.
Okay, well, that's not too far away.
No, I think as long as we get the right people in place, it's a lot of these are chemical engineering, a lot of these are chemistry, and but because it hasn't been developed yet fully, I can't also cost it. So it's also not easy to tell people how much it would cost. Produce the end product, but in theory it makes sense to me.
Is this area fast growing, as in terms of like more and more people are working on these things?
Absolutely. So look, we've been using seaweed, especially in Southeast Asia, for thousands of years. So when you go to Japan or China, you almost, in a lot of food that you eat, you get seaweed. Microalgae business is fairly young. It's maybe 60, 70 years old. People's been eating spirulina from Aztecs time, but they were all naturally grown spirulina in the lakes. A lot of things that we are developing, they're fairly new. So we have a lot of people interested and a lot of people coming on board, but we need more. We need the future generation to come on board. We need the future scientists. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do at Murdoch University, to train the future generation of scientists in this field.
Okay. I'm going to jump to another subject, because I had one of your students give me a list of questions to ask you too. And he wanted me to ask you about Asparagopsis.
Sure.
And I guess what it is and what it's applied with.
So Asparagopsis is a red seaweed, and it generates a compound called bromoform, and bromoform can stop the process of methanogenesis that happens in the cow's stomach, digestive system. So it reduces the overall methane being generated by cows.
Right. So if you had one of your digestion systems going down, and then you use it, and those cows are eating Asparagopsis, is that going to affect that process? No.
It's we're picking up the organic waste at the end of the process, so it doesn't really affect us. Asparagopsis has been marketed as a way to reduce the methane by the cows.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a significant amount of methane which goes to the atmosphere coming from the cows.
That is it. So when you're feeding cows, if you compare like a hay bale to asparagopsis, the price would be. Is that why it's less used now? Or
We looked into asparagopsis around 5-6 years ago, and we decided not to work on it because
Right.
because we have also published a literature review on this. There are some concerning matters when it comes to bromoform and the effect of that on the cows that we decided not to. I'm not saying this cannot be resolved, but I just didn't want us to get involved with it. So that's why our group doesn't work actively on asparagopsis.
Okay, interesting. I wonder why he asked me to ask you that.
That's okay.
I guess maybe because it was like a very hot topic. It
is an extremely hot topic, but there is only 24 hours a day, and there is only so much we can do. So that's why we decided not to focus on asparagopsis.
Well, this wastewater treatment one is, or what was it? What did you call it again at the start?
Waste to profit.
Waste to profit. That sounds absolutely incredible.
Sure.
Yeah. So I can definitely see why you would want to spend more time on that one than the asparagopsis.
You're right. So you see, when you're an academic, you have projects, especially if you're somebody who likes applied science. You've got projects that you're developing first at an honors level, then you do this at the PhD, and if you postdocs. We are at the point that I'm not doing any more research on this. We are at the point of taking this now and commercialize it. So if you come to my lab, we pretty much have no active PhD study on the concept. Right. Everything we do is working with the industry and trying to develop this on industry. Because PhDs are meant to be about something new. When you have answered all of those questions, there is no point of doing further research in this.
Okay.
It's more commercialization now than research.
Yeah. Oh, it's very exciting that this has got to that level, and it's like getting so close. I remember listening to one of your lectures as an undergrad. So I've been at this uni for a long time. But you were talking about turning algae into fuel for cars.
Right.
Like biofuels. How can you do that? I know you mentioned earlier fossil fuels is ancient, ancient algae. And then it's another economic question. Why aren't we doing that more often?
So that's a hard question to answer. Look, technically we can produce biofuel from algae, no problem at all. First of all, this is the holy grail of algae industry, especially microalgae industry. This is because of the scale of this. Remember the wastewater treatment we do with a lot of the farmers and farming practices that we have. We're probably not going to need more than maybe 2 hectares or 3 hectares or maximum 5 hectares of ponds. When you're dealing with biofuel production, you're talking about 190 square kilometers to be able to produce 1% of Australian diesel, for instance. So the scale is massive. It has never been done anywhere at that scale. And one of the reasons is that nobody could ever make the economics work. It doesn't mean that it's never going to work. It just means that until we have the mandate that would ask the people to use the biofuel, I don't think it would be so easy to get the algal biofuel up and running. There is a move right now around producing SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, and there are airports such as Singapore that last year they announced that by 2030 they would expect to have up to 5% of their fuel in the planes landing or departing to be sustainable aviation fuel. And for that, it may actually makes the biofuel production in Australia possible, because that means that they would require a significant amount of sustainable aviation fuel. We do have the process. We do have the algae. We have isolated it 20 years ago, the species of algae that can be successfully grown north of Western Australia for producing fuel. But I think given the size of the production and given the process, I think this is something that needs to be adopted by a large multinational corporation. This is not something that a small startup can do, or I don't think also this should be done by government. A government should be helping with the policies to be able to get these things up and running. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but this is
no, definitely, yeah. Because I thought I didn't think that the restriction from it was actually just the size and scale to develop it. I thought it was like the cost of actually making the biofuel. One of the questions is actually how can you turn algae into fuel?
So it's actually not that hard. There are various processes which are, again, pretty much all of them off the shelf. So if you're after something like biodiesel, so to replace the diesel, you need to extract the oil from the algae, and then there is a process called oh my goodness, I lost the name. There is an easy process that would trans-acidify the oil, which means that removes the OH at the end of the molecule, remove the glycerol and put the methanol at the end. So you get a chain of fuel. The only difference between the biodiesel and the diesel is that you have one molecule of oxygen, one atom of oxygen in there. So this is for biofuel. If you're after something like SAF, there are other processes that you can convert the biomass to sustainable aviation fuel. Again, most of those processes exist, but your question was also on right on the spot. The cost of production is also a limiting factor, because when the oil price goes up, the biofuel becomes more attractive. When the oil price goes down, it gets less attractive. So there is always this trend. But we need to find an alternative for fossil fuel. Human being has to find an alternative for fossil fuel. So let's see what happens in the future.
Yeah, well, it's exciting. Exciting. And although I'm like a person that's on a PhD wage, it's hard to justify whether to try to find, if you're paying $8 a litre of diesel, it's like, whoa, I'm just probably not going to.
Hopefully it's not going to be that much, but the last time we looked at it, it was around $4 to produce.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Normal fuel isn't too far from that.
Yeah. But we haven't looked at the techno-economics of this recently. Again, this is one of those things that we are interested. We are working with whoever is interested in this concept. But as I said, I don't think this is something that through algae harvest we can do on our own. We can help others if they're interested, especially on the how to grow the algae, what is the right species. We have all of those in place, but this would require somebody with a very multinational business.
Hopefully, this is not happening at the R&D center, the Algae Research and Development Center.
We have right now a student looking at the policies of and lack of policies actually required for getting a large microalgae biofuel production process up north in WA. This is how far we're going right now. A lot of other things. Remember, this group has been in place for the last 30 years at Murdoch University.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of the background work on the biofuel production. So the knowledge exists, and we can help. But we just, as I said, because of the size of these, I think this needs more than just one group to tackle it.
In the algae group, your algae group, what are some of the other breakthroughs and projects? Because there's quite a few.
So something that actually came out of the last biofuel projects that we did was because if you want to grow or mass produce algae, especially for commodity products, you don't want to grow them in the freshwater. Freshwater is so finite, you don't want to touch it. You just want to use the freshwater for drinking and growing plants for food. You want to grow them on the seawater, yeah? Because remember, the life started from the sea.
Mm-hmm.
So the algae, they all evolved in the sea. So even the freshwater one, then they decided to go to the freshwater. Originally, all of them evolved in the seawater. So not only these, through evolution and millions of years, some of these species of algae, they could grow in the locations which are, we call them extreme locations, such as high alkalinity, high pH, low pH, or high salinity.
So these are extremophiles?
Extremophiles, exactly. So these extremophiles, especially the one that can grow at the highest salinity, becomes an interest to us.
What's the salinity is what we work a lot in, that influence of the fish faunas and invert faunas in estuaries. What are the levels of salinity?
Yeah, so salt starts saturating at around 25% NaCl and above. We have an alga which grows up to that salinity. It's called Donaliella salina.
So I'm trying to convert in my head, because we used PPT.
It's 250.
250.
That's right, 250 PPT. Yeah. So now,
whoa.
Yeah. So this is unique. Yeah. I mean, you don't get a lot of. So there are only some cyanobacteria and some green algae that can grow, green microalgae that can grow that high salinity.
Well, I'm just going to say for everyone else listening, seawater's 35, freshwater's 0. So 250 is...
Yeah, it's almost saturation.
Yeah.
It's almost saturation. So if you drive north of Perth for 4 hours going to Perth Gregory, there is the largest algal farm in the world established there, producing beta carotene from an alga called Donaliella salina.
Okay.
So this is the one which grows up to almost saturation. And one of the reasons that farm has been in place for that long is because it grows at that high salinity. So it reduces the contamination issue. Remember, by the time that the salinity starts increasing, you get less and less and less potential predators, you get less and less contamination, etc. So going back to your question about what excites me these days is that from that work, we said, okay, if we are going to produce biofuel, what's the most logical thing to do? We don't want to touch the freshwater. We want to use the open ponds because of they're cheaper compared to the closed water bioreactors. So now, if we fill up the pond with the seawater, 35 ppt, and we grow the algae in it, in place such as Pilbara, which is one of the best locations for mass production of algae, you get something around 1 meter of an evaporation per year.
Right.
So now, it's a fantastic place to grow algae, but if you're getting evaporation, and if you want to also recycle the water, after the harvesting of the algae, you want to recycle it. You want to recycle as much as you can because you want to use every nutrient which is still remaining in the water. You don't want to discharge the water. So now, discharge the recycled water. So by the time that you're recycling the water, and because of evaporation, and if you're using seawater as a top-up, the salinity starts rising. So now, a lot of people see this as an issue, but we saw that as a fantastic opportunity to not only look at one species cultivation, looking at multi-stage growth of algae. So now we have isolated the species of algae that can grow in that marine up to 50 ppt, between marine to before halophile, which is, we call it halotolerant, which is between 50 to 150 ppt, and above 150 ppt, which is Donaliella salina. So now that was the process, and these were the species that we isolated around 14, 15 years ago. Now, after that didn't work because of the cost associated, because of the scale, etc. We look at other applications, and one of the things that hit me is that in our wheat belt region, we have the soil salinity issue. And this soil salinity has been coming and it's been increasing. And when you talk to the farmers, actually they're getting more, and these marginal lands getting more and more and more because the salinity is increasing.
I'm just going to give context for secondary salinization. It's when you remove the trees, the soil,
That's right.
the salty water in the ground rises up to the top.
Exactly.
And then obviously a lot of plants and trees can't survive in that. And then for the estuary's sake, a lot of this salt ends up in estuaries, making estuary super salty to the places, or areas that fish can't, or all life can't live in it.
That's exactly correct.
So,
That's exactly. So now I said, look, can we use these species of algae that we isolated? So now they can grow at the highest salinity. Can we now use these, go to the farmers, and instead of letting these underground higher salinity to cause an issue for the soil, we direct them to the ponds, and now use that technology that I mentioned. Because of the evaporation, because of the recycling, the salinity would increase. Can we use at least some of this water rather than getting to the soil, keeping it in the pond, while keeping it in the pond, growing the algae, but now this time not growing the species that are for commodity, not for biofuel production, but producing species that are producing high value products, such as high value pigments, such as fish oil, such as the products which would benefit the farmers at the smallest scale. Because I don't think we can expect the farmers to go and produce 190 square kilometers of algae farms. Now, if we do this, and if this can be adopted by the farmers, that can be an extra source of revenue for the farmers with the species which are locally isolated. Now, the proof of concept is done. We've done the proof of concept, but I'm actually right now in the process of putting a grant together with a couple of organizations to apply for a drought fund, to see if we can get some federal funding to be able to support this, to take this to a farm, to put some of the ponds in the farm and do the testing at the farm, to look at the economics, and then see if we can convince them that this is a good idea.
Sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like it, yeah. In my mind, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, it all goes back to economics a lot of time for the farmers.
So, what about using like the salt ponds and like working with those miners? Because like the mining, like in the Pilbara especially, they've just the K&S Salt and those other big brands that making huge salt ponds, massive salt ponds.
That's another opportunity. I think that is something I'm hoping that the mining industry would reach out and then we can have a discussion at some stage, but we haven't done much work on that.
Okay.
Again, I'm not sure if you notice, I'm very focused on helping, especially farming community, because we need farmers. We need farmers to be able to produce food for us.
Mm-hmm. I come from a big farming family.
So that's always been one of my mission. And also trying to tap to the waste side of the things. And to me, this underground saline water, which is causing issue, is a waste. Can we use it instead of looking at it as a waste, as a resource to produce a product for the farmers when they hit bad? Yeah, I mean, on the land that they cannot use it for anything, to produce high value product. And some of these pigments can be sold anywhere between $600 to $6,000 a kilogram. So when you think about it, it can be a boutique, niche, a small scale production for them, but hopefully it can be extended in the future.
Yeah, it sounds extremely exciting. What about, can you cultivate in the ocean? Because that was
No. With seaweed you can, as long as you have some sort of restriction in the right place. With microalgae, you don't want to go. No,
you can't hold it in.
I don't call me a control freak, but I like to be able to be in charge of what I do.
Okay.
If you are in the open ocean, you don't buy, and if you anyway fertilizing, you're causing another potential bloom of algae in the ocean. So no.
Okay.
In my view, no, it's a no.
And it was just a question I had to ask.
No, fair enough. No, when you think about it, it may make sense, but no, to be honest, no. When you deep into this, it's it can cause potentially more problems than fix problems.
Okay, yeah. I've got a couple more questions, and I know we're sort of running out of time.
So sorry about that.
No, this is great. No, this is exactly, like, my mind has just been blown away by everything that you're doing. Like, I wasn't that aware of everything that was happening there and all these byproducts and everything.
And we just talked about 2 applications.
Yeah.
Because I didn't cover another 2 very well. Yeah, I mean, I didn't cover the biofuel for you and the asparagopsis. I only covered these two. There are others that we can discuss, but yeah, ask your
I think we
questions.
have to do a part 2.
That's okay. That's fine.
Definitely. I just, on my walk here, and I was ran into someone and then said I was interviewing you today, and they were asking me about the growing algae on buildings.
Yeah. Yeah. So, good question. We had my first PhD candidates that I had here at Murdoch. He looked into the opportunity of selecting light for growing algae. Remember, when you in the light, a big portion of the light, the plants can't use it. The big portion of the light actually heat up the trees, heat up the process of photosynthesis. That's the infrared. Another portion of the light, which is UV, cause mutation, cause a lot of problems. And even in the white light, which the algae sees for photosynthesis, potentially only 2 parts, the blue and red, are the ones that the photosynthesis can use effectively. So my students, the PhD candidate, looked at to see if we can filter the light and just give only those portions of the light to the algae to grow. And it was very successful. And the aim was that, okay, can we put these filters on the surface of the pond? So instead of we giving the algae all the unneeded light, only give them the light that they need, but then transfer the remaining energy to electricity through the solar panels, for instance. It worked, but at the end of the PhD, we looked at it and we said, okay, it does work, but how can we install these on the top of the pond? Yeah, because in principle, it was working. Mm-hmm. It was working extremely nicely, but in reality, to install that on the top of the ponds, the construction would be massive. The cost would be massive. So we had the second PhD student that we said, okay, no, instead of looking at this for the open system, why can't we just integrate it in the closed water bioreactors? So closed water bioreactors that I'm talking about is the same as the small aquarium, but the aquarium you've got at home, the depth of the aquarium is sometimes is 50 centimeter, even more. These are narrow. So these are between 2 to 10 centimeters in depth. So we said, look, in the front of the photobioreactor, can we put a solar panel, which is semi-transparent, which would only allow portion of the light that we want to grow the algae, and then the remaining we use it for electricity. And he demonstrated that this can be done. I mean, 10, 15 papers later that we knew that the process can be done. So when this was done, I said, look, okay, so now we have the photobioreactors. What can we do with it? What's the application of this? And one thing that came to my mind, I said, look, can we just put this instead of the normal windows in the buildings? Can we put this into the buildings or either this or put it in the facades of the building? One of motivation was that a few months before that, I went to Singapore for a conference. And when you're in Singapore, you're looking at the buildings, all the buildings are green. They've got plenty of the plants growing on the building. So I don't think we can do this in Perth. It's so dry. So if you put the plants on the facades of the building, you need to use a lot of fresh water to keep them surviving. I said, okay, so look, what if it's a closed water bioreactor and this system doesn't need to be cooled down because we are removing the heat? Because of we're actually converting the heat to electricity. And that was the motivation for this last project that I have a PhD candidate right now, which is an architect. And his project is to see how to integrate these bioreactors into the facades of the building. He just did his gallery a few days ago. You're most welcome to go and have a look at some of the posters are still there. Yeah, so we're looking for a partner. We think this is something that can be applicable to the mining industry, especially for mining camps. We think this is something that if an architecture firm is interested, we're more than happy to help them to further develop this. Yeah.
Wow.
And most interestingly, in the photobioreactors, we grow spirulina. So potentially you can use the biomass also on the spot to for the people who lives in the building as a source of supplement.
Yeah. This sounds like the way of the future.
Yeah, so again, when you go back, some of these ideas comes from sci-fi.
Oh, really?
So yeah. So one of there has been a very famous Russian novelist who introduced actually algae in the space concept many years ago. That we are living in Mars and we have buildings which has algae all around it, etc. It does make sense. Some of these things make sense.
Yeah. Wow. That definitely gives us a lot of hope. And a lot of time when we're talking about the future, it can be quite pessimistic, but sounds like there could be so many potential benefits and things that could be helping. So in a way, it's been a very inspiring.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And thank you so much for coming in today. I reckon we'll do part 2. I really just scraped the surface.
Sure.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Paramount importance.
This production was recorded at the podcast studios in the Media Arts Centre at Murdoch University. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Murdoch University. Any content provided by the hosts and guests are their personal opinions and are not intended to represent the views or opinions of the university, its administration, faculty, or staff.